So I found a couple of days ago this Empire simulator in YouTube. This is made by someone called Sundelvis, and I found it to be very cool, and I loved it, and I think this is the kind of thing I would have loved to do, but I don't have the skills to do this. But I would love to help. This is how this runs, and the author says it's considering travel costs and the agriculture potential for each place on Earth, and the simulators go something like this, and I think it's so cool. So I visited the website, and I couldn't really find more information about how these transport costs and agriculture potential are being calculated, or from what database they come from. So I just want to help and maybe throw some ideas about data, mostly. So I'm gonna show you. I love history. I'm not a historian. I love history. I've been like 25 years I've been reading history and collecting data. I love to see history through geography, and so I want to show some of the data that might be useful to improve this. So what I'm showing here is a platform named GAES, the Global Agroecological Zoning. This is a platform created by the United Nations FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. This is really a mathematical model that was created to portray the agricultural potential of each place on Earth, considering the soil, the climate, the topography, and other variables. And the possibility of humans changing that through mainly two things: increasing the amount of water through irrigation, as opposed to just trusting the rain, and the possibility of introducing what they call inputs, meaning fertilizers, pesticides, and other chemicals. And so you can see here where are the true places with agricultural potential, and you can see this for every of the major crops we have. They have like 25 crops, commercial and food crops. I'm showing here wheat, and I chose here the option with trusting only rain, meaning no irrigation or very little irrigation, and no inputs, no fertilizers or other chemicals, because I think that's more realistic to pre-modern societies. So what we can see in this particular case of wheat is that you can grow wheat in the Middle East and in Europe with success enough, but in the case of Africa, which I think is interesting, what we can see is that wheat really doesn't work in Africa. You can grow it with success enough here in South Africa, or at least in this part of South Africa, and Ethiopia, and not many other places. So wheat was not in Africa what it was in the Middle East, in Europe. So and that's why in Africa the staple was really another crop, which is called sorghum, which is original from Africa, and this, as you can see, works much better. There are a lot more places where you can reasonably grow this thing. Still, of course, the Sahara is excluded, the Kalahari Desert is excluded, the Somalia Desert is excluded, and yet in these parts, the central parts, which roughly correspond to the jungles of Africa, it doesn't work either, really. So it's better, it's much better than wheat, but it still is wanting. So what is the potential for Africa, the agriculture potential for Africa? Probably in the early stages of history, it was this, really. But this tool also helps you to understand how this potential change over time. So when America was discovered and the American crops became available to the rest of the world, this potential changed. So when the wonder crop of America, maize, became available, so this clearly increased the potential, the agriculture potential for Africa. As you can see here, this is much better. And in these parts, the jungle-rich parts of Africa, another American crop, the cassava, was even better. So these two crops alone helped a lot to change the potential to grow food in Africa. So basically the agriculture potential of the world has changed. So over the years I have collected many layers of data because I'd like to see history through geography, and one of the things I want to show you is a very big database of cities. These are ancient cities that existed at one time or another before the Industrial Revolution. I don't remember why I have separated there here in green and red, but it doesn't matter. And this is very large. There are like 4,000 of them. You can see, for example, here the cluster showing the Mexican pre-modern city, in the Peru and Bolivia cities, in the Andean, in the Sahel and Africa in general. You can see here almost the Nile being dotted by the cities, the Egyptian cities, Angola, Zimbabwe, the Swahili coast, India, a lot of them in India, many more here in China. So I was wondering that one can maybe in the Empire simulator use ancient cities locations instead of modern ones that seem to be what you're using now. It's very cool also that when you start collecting these cities, you also see where places where there weren't cities. There's clearly a very big empty area here, and that of course is the Tibet, the mountains of Tibet. So here I have another layer. This is data from NASA. This is geography. This is altitude, which I have filtered by a threshold of 4,000 meters. These are really like the very big mountains, the places that are actually really useless for humans, useless for empires at the very least, and you can see why. I mean, you can see how the effect it has on the possibilities of cities to appear. So you have that. You have the Andes mountain here. Here you can see, for example, how the cities in the Andean region existed, but not in the very high mountains. Of course, that may seem obvious, but it's very useful to see it like that. So those are a couple of layers. I have other ones. I have a layer of lakes and bodies of water. I'm not sure if this could help the Empire simulator. Maybe one could argue that the lakes are maybe a barrier where they cluster a lot, like places like this, like each one of these is a lake. Maybe that has some sort of significance in transportation cost. I'm not sure about that, but that's another possible layer. I have a lot of information I've taken from a database that's called the Hydro Atlas. Despite its name, it's not only water related. There are, of course, lakes and rivers and rain regimes and things like that, but also there's a lot of other information like location of forests and shrubs and other environmental information. And when it comes to transportation costs, of course we know rivers play a big role. Transport is much cheaper over water than over land. So one of the things I got from the Hydro Atlas are rivers, and I have selected here what I think are the most relevant rivers. I have taken a threshold of 20 cubic meters per second of water, of flowing water. And of course you can see places that have a lot of rivers like Europe or the Congo network here, India, of course, Bangladesh, Southeast Asia, the south of China, and places that don't have as many rivers, like all of the Central Asia, which is very interesting, I think. So I think one could improve the data regarding transport cost, maybe calculating some sort of density of rivers in each place. That's rivers. One of the things I like the most, and I'm convinced it's very important, but historians rarely mention it, is rock terrain. Rock terrain is basically a landscape with a lot of hills, hill after hill after hill, which means topography goes up and down, and those kind of places aren't, of course, very attractive for agriculture and cities. So this is NASA data that I have processed with an algorithm from QGIS that lets you see how rugged the terrain is, and of course you can see, for example, places like this that are of course very unattractive to settle in, and when you overlap this information with cities, for example, you can see how this affect the places where people settle, and I think for the case of the empire simulator, it affects where empires can reach and what the natural barriers become thanks to this ruggedness. So I'm gonna click, for example, here the cities. I'm going to let me eliminate the labels. So here one can see, for example, in Southeast Asia, this is here Myanmar, for example, and one can clearly see that the cities are, of course, chosen to locate in the flat areas. The same here. This is Thailand. This is Cambodia. This is Vietnam. You can see that cities are are avoiding the rugged terrain. Even in places where you can, at some scale, seem to believe that the cities are in the rugged terrain, they are actually in kind of these islands of flat land surrounded by rugged terrain. You can see also here in the central plains of China and how these places with rugged terrain are unattractive for settlement. This is the Sichuan province in China. You can see how this works basically like a large island of flatter land where people settle. And well, so I think looking at ruggedness, one can create better data for transport costs, meaning barriers, meaning how difficult it is for empires to cross those boundaries. Deserts are, of course, important not only because of their low agriculture potential, which anyway could be better represented by the other database I talked to you about, the GAES, but they matter for transport costs. So I created, in a long process, taking mostly data from the Hydro Atlas, I created these deserts from combining variables like precipitation and temperature ranges and groundwater levels and other things, and I came up finally with this. This, of course, is very detailed, and you can see, for example, here is the Nile gets to be seen as contrast from with the desert, and well, this is worldwide again. And I think so that the transport cost in the Empire simulator could be improved by including this information or something like it as well. So that's it for data sources. I just want to make some comments. I'm hoping I don't sound very too greedy. But I like it. I like the Empire simulator. My biggest criticism would be that I'm not really sure when I'm running it where I'm standing in the base conditions. Humans, our ability to deal with geography has changed over time considerably. Of course, there's the most basic idea of technology. If you have a technology like sailboats, then you can deal with oceans in a way that you cannot do without that technology, and therefore the capacity of empires and societies to reach farther places is quite different. Famously, obviously, the horse and the camel, which are extremely important in transport costs, those animals weren't introduced to humans from the very beginning. The Sumerians and the Babylonians didn't have camels or horses, but other societies that lived on the same very spots, like the Arabs, they had them. And that changes very dramatically the capacity of those empires that were based there. So and as I said before, the agricultural potential of each place changes over time. So the same place could be fertile or not, depending on what crops do you have available for planting. And that has changed, most famously with the discovery of America, but also throughout history at other times. Bananas famously are originally from Southeast Asia, and they reached Africa about 2,000 years ago, maybe somewhat more. We're not exactly sure how, but only then bananas became a very important part of the diet in Africa, and increased the agriculture potential of the tropical places of Africa. So when I'm running this simulation, I'm not sure where I'm standing in these scenarios. Am I seeing a competition where all societies have camels and horses and have all the technologies, sailboats and the wheel, and what crops do they have so they can exploit the surroundings? So there's seemingly a kind of assumption about those variables that it's not transparent, and being greedy about it, I would love to have some sort of, maybe we can call it eras or epochs, so I can run the same simulation with some assumptions of the available technologies and crops and pack animals that are available to some societies, and other epochs that don't necessarily have that, and I can know what exactly is going on. In that regard, I think forests require more attention. Forests in the beginning were a real problem, because original pristine forests are thick. You can't just walk through a forest, much less with pack animals bringing goods, and forget about any wheel cart. The real reason why Europe and Russia in particular, the one that you mentioned in your video, developed later than Asian societies is because in Europe, you in Central Europe, North Europe, Eastern Europe, you have to clear the forests first before you can realize it's the agriculture potential, and not only the agriculture potential, but also take advantage of the topography. I mean, the topography underneath the forest may be flat, which seemingly is a very good thing if you want to move and facing lower transport costs. But if there is a thick, pristine forest on top of it, it's not that easy. So again, when I'm running the simulation, what am I seeing? Is this Russia, for example, in this particular case in the video? Is Russia at the moment of the simulation full with forests, with natural forests, or are we dealing with it in a much later period when forests have already been reduced and managed in many places? So yes, I know I'm greedy and all of that, but all I want to say is that it seems that geography is being taken too static, and one could at least introduce some ways to separate periods or include maybe even greedier variables that can change these effects over time. Overall, I think the project is fantastic. I'm glad to help. If you want if you want me to share some of the data I have shown, or just talk more about it, drop me a line. That's my mail. Goodbye.